That morning, my youngest son, who works as a cruise ship captain, called me. Dad, is my sister-in-law at home? I just saw her board my ship. I personally checked her passport. It's definitely her. I froze. Upstairs, the sound of the shower turned off, followed by the soft thud of footsteps. My daughter-in-law appeared at the top of the stairs, her hair still wet, looking down at me with a slight smile. My heart practically stopped. If my daughter-in-law was standing right in front of me, then who on earth did my son see on that ship? That morning, when Cameron called, I was standing at the kitchen sink, my hands deep in soapy water, watching the November sunlight splash gold across the harbor. I remember thinking Margaret would have loved a morning like this. Crisp air, clear blue sky, the kind of day that makes you grateful to be alive in Annapolis. But Margaret had been gone for 12 years, and I had learned to hold gratitude and grief in the exact same breath. Dad, Cameron's voice came through the speakerphone, quiet and tense. He always called me Dad, never Pops or Father, calm and steady, just like he had been since taking command of a ship at 24. I wiped my hands on the dish towel, a blue one with little sailboats that my grandson Noah had picked out last Christmas. The 7-year-old had good taste. Cameron, shouldn't you be halfway to Nassau by now? We're docked in Miami for a crew swap, he said. There was an unfamiliar hesitation in his voice. Cameron didn't hesitate. He made split-second decisions in severe storms that would paralyze most people. Dad, I need to ask you something, and I need you to stay calm. I set down the coffee mug I was washing. It was my oldest son, Michael's favorite, the one that read World's Most Okayest Son, a gag gift from Father's Day 3 years ago. Michael had a sense of humor as dry as Chesapeake Bay sand. What is it? Nothing is wrong exactly, it's just... Cameron let out a long, slow breath. Dad, is Vanessa at home right now? I glanced up at the ceiling toward the second floor, where I had heard the shower running 20 minutes earlier. My daughter-in-law had moved in with us 6 months ago, after Michael was promoted to IT director at Chesapeake Digital Systems. She said she wanted to help take care of Noah while Michael was traveling to see clients. At the time, I thought it was a thoughtful gesture. She's upstairs, I said, taking a shower. Why? Silence. Not the comfortable silence of our usual Sunday calls, but a heavy, loaded silence full of unsaid words. Cameron? Dad, that's impossible. His voice dropped lower, barely above a whisper. I'm looking right at Vanessa. She's on my ship. The dish towel slipped from my hand. What are you talking about? The Majestic of the Seas, Dad. Yesterday afternoon, when she boarded at Miami Terminal C, I saw her passport with my own eyes. I checked her in myself. Suite 124, bridge deck. I thought it was strange she hadn't mentioned coming aboard, but I assumed she was trying to surprise Michael for an anniversary or something. He paused. 20 minutes ago, I saw her on the promenade deck on level 7. She was wearing a white sundress, talking to a man I didn't recognize. I called out to her, but the wind blew her name away. But Dad, I swear to you, it was Vanessa. My heart did something strange, a missed beat, followed by 2 hard thumps that reminded me I was 68 and hadn't seen a cardiologist in 2 years. Cameron, that's impossible. I heard her voice this morning. She made breakfast for Noah before school and drove him to Annapolis Elementary. I watched her car pull out of the driveway. Then, who am I looking at? Upstairs, the water stopped running. The old pipes groaned the way they always did, a fix I'd been meaning to get to since the Carter administration, but never found the time for. Hold on, I said. I left the phone on the counter, still on speaker, and walked toward the stairs. Michael had been in Arlington all week, working 12-hour days on a massive database migration project for a client in Northern Virginia. He left Monday morning with his laptop bag, promising to return Thursday night, or maybe Friday if things went sideways, which meant the only people in this house were me, Noah, and a woman I suddenly wasn't sure I knew at all. Vanessa? I called up the stairs. No answer. I put a hand on the banister and started up, taking the steps slowly. My knees weren't what they used to be. Too many years of crewing sailboats in the Naval Academy Basin, too many Saturdays spent coaching youth soccer when the boys were small. The second-floor hallway smelled faintly of lavender soap, Vanessa's favorite. The bathroom door stood slightly ajar, steam curling out like morning fog over the water. Vanessa, you okay in there? A shadow moved behind the frosted glass of the shower door. Then the door slid open. A woman stepped out, wrapped in a white bath towel, dark hair dripping onto her bare shoulders. She looked identical to Vanessa. Same heart-shaped face, same dark brown eyes, same small mole just above her left collarbone. But something was off. The way she held herself was stiffer, more guarded. "Harold?" A voice came from behind me. I spun around. Vanessa, or another woman who looked exactly like her, stood at the top of the stairs, wearing jeans and a burgundy sweater, car keys dangling from her hand. Her hair was dry, styled. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Do you need something? I was just about to head to the farmer's market." I looked at her, then back at the woman in the towel, then back again. My brain stalled out, trying to process geometry that defied reason. Downstairs in the kitchen, Cameron's voice drifted up through the speakerphone, faint and distant. "Dad, you still there?" The woman in the towel pulled it tighter around herself. The woman on the stairs took a step forward. They were identical. Not similar, identical. Same height, same frame, even the same faint scar over the right eyebrow that Vanessa had once mentioned, getting from a childhood accident. My mouth opened and closed. Nothing came out. I stood there in the hallway, my phone still on the counter downstairs. Cameron's voice a distant hum. I stared at these two women carrying my daughter-in-law's face. How could she possibly be in two places at once? I didn't sleep that night. Every creak of the hardwood floor upstairs sounded like a footsteps I couldn't trust. By dawn, I made a decision. I wouldn't confront her just yet. Margaret used to say, "Trust your eyes, Harold, but verify with your heart." So I chose to watch. On Tuesday morning, 3 days after Cameron's call, I came downstairs to find the kitchen spotless. The countertops were gleaming. The breakfast dishes were washed, dried, and put away. The faint smell of lemon cleaner hung in the air. Vanessa stood at the stove, humming quietly as she flipped pancakes. Her shoulders were relaxed, a gentle smile on her face. I stood there holding my coffee mug, trying to remember the last time I'd seen her like this. The answer was simple. Never. My real daughter-in-law didn't clean. Not regularly, anyway. Last summer, over a few beers at a backyard barbecue, Michael had complained about it. "Dad, I love her, but she'll leave dishes in the sink for 3 days." He had laughed it off. I kept my mouth shut. It wasn't my place. But this woman, cheerfully humming while she cooked, was completely different. "Good morning, Harold." She glanced over her shoulder. "I made extra pancakes." I sat down, watching her every move. Everything about her seemed lighter, less heavy. Noah came thumping down the stairs, grabbing a pancake with his bare hands. "These are really good, Mom." She ruffled his hair. "Glad you like them, sweetie." After they left for school, I walked back into the kitchen. The sink was empty, spotless. I opened the dishwasher, empty too. She had washed everything by hand. Pulling out my phone, I found an old photo from Michael's 40th birthday, last August. In the background, visible through the kitchen doorway, our sink was piled high with plates, crusted pans, and juice glasses with dried residue at the bottom. Vanessa had already been living here for 2 months at that point. I set the phone down, uneasy. The following afternoon, Wednesday, our neighbor, Diane Morrison, knocked on the door around 3 o'clock. She walked into the kitchen carrying a glass bowl covered in plastic wrap. "Harold, I was down at the city dock this morning and they had fresh shrimp right off the boat. I made you some shrimp salad. You know, the kind Margaret always loved, with Old Bay and celery." My chest tightened at the sound of my wife's name, but I forced a smile. "Diane, that's very kind of you." "Nonsense." She set the bowl on the counter. "Where's Vanessa? I want to say hello." "I'm right here." A voice came from the hallway. Vanessa appeared, wearing jeans and an oversized sweater, her hair pulled back. She smiled at Diane, that pleasant smile I was growing accustomed to. "Diane, how sweet of you." "Just neighborly love." Diane pulled off the plastic wrap. "Fresh Chesapeake Bay shrimp. Don't let it sit too long. It's best today." The smell hit the room immediately. A sweet, salty ocean scent, mixed with mayonnaise and seasoning. "That looks delicious," Vanessa said. "We'll have to try some." Diane pulled a sleeve of crackers from my pantry and set them out. "Harold, grab a couple of small plates." I moved on autopilot, bringing down 3 small plates, while Diane scooped out generous portions of the pink, chunky salad. She handed a plate to Vanessa, one to me, and took her own, sitting in a chair by the dining table. Go ahead, Diane urged. Tell me what you think. Vanessa picked up a cracker, scooped a bite of shrimp salad, and put it in her mouth. My hand froze around my plate. She chewed, swallowed, and smiled. Oh, Diane, this is wonderful. Is that dill I taste? Just a touch, Diane beamed. And a splash of lemon juice, my mother's recipe. Vanessa reached for another cracker, took another bite, and then another. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. July 4th of last year, the parking lot of Joseph Novak's bakery. Kids running around with sparklers, American flags everywhere. Someone brought a tray of crab cakes made with fresh blue crab from the bay. Vanessa took one bite, just one. Within 3 minutes, her face began to swell. Her throat closed so quickly that Michael had to drive an EpiPen into her thigh, right there while I called 911. We spent hours at Anne Arundel Medical Center while doctors monitored her breathing and pumped her full of medication. The doctor was crystal clear, a severe shellfish allergy. Any contact with shrimp, crab, or lobster could trigger anaphylactic shock. She needed to avoid it entirely. And yet here was this woman sitting at my dining table, eating Diane Morrison's shrimp salad, chatting about recipes as if it were the most natural thing in the world. No swelling, no hives, no desperate reach for medication, nothing. Harold? Diane's voice broke the silence. You haven't touched a bite. Is something wrong? No. I cleared my throat. Just thinking about something. It's delicious, Diane, thank you. She stayed for another 20 minutes, talking about the upcoming Maritime Festival in December. Vanessa laughed at all the right moments, asked thoughtful questions, and played her role perfectly. After Diane finally left, I stood at the kitchen counter staring at the bowl of shrimp salad. My hands were shaking. That evening, Noah came downstairs for dinner wearing his Orioles jersey. He looked at Vanessa and tilted his head. Grandpa, what is it, buddy? Why is Mom so happy lately? Vanessa's hand slipped. Her fork dropped onto the table with a clatter. What do you mean, sweetie? Noah screwed up his face. She hums all the time and she smells different. Like Grandpa's soap, not that purple flower smell. Lavender, I said quietly. Your mother used to wear lavender perfume. Vanessa laughed a little too quickly. I ran out, sweetie. I'll buy more this weekend. Noah nodded, satisfied. Michael finally made it home around 9 that night. I heard his car pull into the driveway, the engine cut, and the heavy sigh of a man who had spent 10 hours staring at a computer screen. He walked into the kitchen, tie loosened, sleeves rolled up, eyes bloodshot. Hey, Dad, long day. Longest day. He grabbed a beer from the fridge and twisted off the cap. Found 3 more bugs in the deployment. I have to go back to Arlington tomorrow. Might not be home until Friday, maybe later. He leaned down and kissed the top of Vanessa's head while she sat at the table flipping through a magazine. Don't wait up for me tomorrow night. Okay, she said softly. He drank half the beer, muttered something about needing a shower, and trudged upstairs. He was too exhausted to notice anything out of the ordinary, too consumed by code and client deadlines to see what was happening right in his own home. That night, I locked myself in my study and pulled out the leather notebook Margaret had given me 30 years ago. I clicked my ballpoint pen. Day 1, November 7th, Tuesday. Kitchen spotless. Humming while cooking. The real Vanessa, VR, never cleans. Michael complained she leaves dishes for days. This woman washed everything immediately. Too cheerful. Something is wrong. Day 2, November 8th, Wednesday. Diane Morrison brought shrimp salad. Fresh homemade bay shrimp. Vanessa ate several servings on crackers right in front of us. No reaction whatsoever. VR has a severe allergy. Used an EpiPen on July 4th. Nearly died in the ER. This woman eats shrimp like it's nothing. Day 3, November 9th, Thursday. Noah noticed, Mom is so happy lately. Smell changed too. Lavender is gone, replaced by regular soap. She panicked slightly when Noah mentioned it. Michael arrived home at 9 p.m., exhausted, leaving for Arlington again tomorrow, completely unaware. I pressed the pen down hard, the ink bleeding into the paper. Day 3. She is not my daughter-in-law, but who is she? On Thursday morning, I put her to the test. Vanessa, I called out from the dining table, my coffee in front of me and the Capital Gazette spread open. She was cutting up strawberries at the counter for Noah's lunchbox. Do you remember where we held Noah's 5th birthday party? She paused, the knife hovering over the cutting board. At home, right? No. I kept my voice light. We held it at Quiet Waters Park. Michael rented the pavilion near the playground. It rained halfway through, and all the kids had to run for cover. You made a chocolate cake shaped like a baseball glove. She smiled, though it sounded uncertain. Oh, right. I must have confused it with another year. There was no other year. Noah had only had 5 birthdays since Vanessa joined the family, and I remembered every single one. I folded the newspaper. I'm heading out for a bit. Need anything from town? No, I'm good, thanks, Harold. I grabbed my coat and left before she could ask where I was going. The Main Street bakery was just 3 blocks from my house. It was a narrow brick storefront with a hand-painted sign, filled with the aroma of yeast and sugar every time the door opened. Joseph Novak had run the place for 20 years. A grounded, no-nonsense man with flour always dusted on his forearms. The bell rang as I walked in. Joseph looked up from behind the counter and smiled. Harold, let me guess. 2 croissants and a cinnamon raisin bagel. You know me too well. He pulled out a paper bag while I leaned against the counter. Hey, Joseph, can I ask you something? Sure, he began packing the items. Have you noticed anything different about Vanessa lately? His hand slowed down. He glanced toward the back of the shop, where his assistant was pulling a tray of muffins from the oven, then lowered his voice. You know, now that you mention it, I have. He sealed the bag and slid it across the counter. She used to come in every Saturday morning like clockwork. Always ordered 2 cinnamon rolls, said they were Michael's favorite. She'd chat about Noah's soccer games and ask about my daughter at community college. Very friendly. But then, maybe 6 months ago, she kept coming in, but it was different. No eye contact. Ordered whatever was closest to the register. Last week, she walked right past me without saying a word, like she didn't even know me. He shrugged. I figured maybe things were rough between her and Michael. What about her husband? I asked. Has Michael noticed any of this? Joseph shrugged as he wiped down the counter. Michael? Harold, if I'm lucky, I see that kid once a week. He's always traveling. Arlington, Baltimore, somewhere up north for tech. Working himself to the bone. He shook his head. Poor guy is probably too tired to notice much when he is home. You know how those IT jobs are. I did know, and Joseph was right. 6 months. That matched the timeline Cameron had mentioned, when she started acting distant and detached. Thanks, Joseph. I paid and stepped outside. The Annapolis Farmers Market set up in the parking lot behind the Pipier Recreation Center every Saturday, but a few regulars kept small stands during the week. I found Joyce Lawson in her usual spot near the entrance, arranging heirloom tomatoes into neat pyramids. Good morning, Joyce. Harold. She straightened up, wiping her hands on her apron. Haven't seen you in a while. How's that fast-growing grandson of yours? I picked up a tomato, turning it over in my hand. Joyce, I wanted to ask, have you noticed anything unusual about Vanessa? Her smile faded. Funny you should ask. What's going on? She was here last week, I called out. Good morning, Vanessa. And she just stared at me blankly, like she had no idea who I was. Finally, she smiled, said a tiny, oh, hi, and grabbed the first bag of peas she saw without even checking if they were fresh. Joyce shook her head. Vanessa used to spend 10 minutes picking out tomatoes, asking about the varieties. She knew her produce, but last week, it was like looking at a different person. How long has she been like this? 6 months. Maybe small things at first, forgetting conversations we had the week before. Then she stopped coming as often. When she does show up, she's in and out in 5 minutes. I bought a bag of apples I didn't need and walked home slowly, my mind racing. When I got back, Diane Morrison was sitting on my front porch, a Tupperware container on her lap. Harold, I brought over that apple crisp I promised you. She stood up, adjusting her cardigan. Is Vanessa home? I wanted to say hi. She's inside. I opened the door for her. Diane, can I ask you something? Sure. You mentioned yesterday that Vanessa seemed different. Could you tell me what you meant? Diane set the container on the counter and turned to me, a thoughtful look on her face. Actually, she seems nicer now, more attentive, but... She hesitated. Last week I mentioned Margaret's favorite flower, those purple irises she used to plant along the fence every spring. Vanessa looked at me like I was speaking another language. I had to remind her what they were called. Diane frowned. Margaret talked about those flowers all the time, Harold. Vanessa should have remembered. Does Michael see much of her these days? I asked carefully. Diane pursed her lips. Not much. He's away 3 or 4 days a week. When he is home, he's exhausted. Last Saturday morning, I saw him heading to his car with his laptop. Working weekends now, too. She sighed. That promotion has been tough on him. I nodded slowly. It certainly had. My chest felt tight. Thanks, Diane. After she left, I walked up to the second floor, past Noah's room with its superhero posters and Legos on the floor, and stopped at my bedroom door. Margaret's jewelry box sat on my dresser where it had rested for 12 years. Dark cherry wood, brass hinges with a small key I kept in the drawer beneath it. Since her passing, I had opened it maybe twice. Once to lend Vanessa a bracelet for a wedding, and once to show Noah a photo of his grandmother wearing her pearl necklace. I unlocked it now and lifted the lid. The top tray was empty, except for a pair of inexpensive earrings Margaret had bought at a craft fair decades ago. I lifted the tray out. The bottom compartment was empty too. My hands began to shake. Margaret's engagement ring, a 1.5-carat diamond set in platinum, the ring I saved for 6 months to buy when I was 23, was gone. The Akoya pearl necklace I gave her for our 25th anniversary, 18 inches long, every pearl perfectly matched, costing a full month's salary, was gone. And my grandfather's solid gold Omega Seamaster watch, with his initials engraved on the back, gone. I slumped onto the edge of the bed, staring at the empty velvet-lined box in my hands. The ring alone was worth $15,000. The necklace, another $25,000. The Omega watch was easily worth $12,000 to a collector, if not more. Then I thought of Margaret's smaller diamond dress watch, the one with the sapphire accent around the bezel that her mother had given her for special occasions. I checked the drawer where she had kept it. Gone, too. $65,000, maybe more. Every last bit of it was gone. I sat there for a long time, staring at the blank indentations in the fabric, trying to recall when I had last seen any of it. We took a family portrait last Christmas. Michael had insisted on gathering everyone for a proper photo shoot. Was Vanessa wearing the pearls then? I couldn't remember. My brain simply couldn't process it. Downstairs, I heard the heavy click of the front door opening. Vanessa's voice echoed up the stairwell. Harold, I'm taking Noah to soccer practice. We'll be back around 5. The door clicked shut again. A car engine started, idled for a second, and pulled away. I looked down at my hands, still trembling around the empty box. She was robbing us blind. But why? And who was helping her? I needed advice. Or maybe I just needed someone to tell me I hadn't lost my mind. That afternoon, I drove down to the City Dock Cafe, a little waterfront spot with outdoor tables overlooking the harbor. Sailboats rocked gently at their moorings, and tourists strolled past with ice cream cones. The quiet, ordinary rhythm of the day felt bizarre compared to the chaos spiraling inside my head. Vernon Nash was already there, sitting at our usual table with a cup of black coffee and a half-finished crossword puzzle. As I pulled up a chair, he looked up and immediately set his pen down. "You look terrible," he said. "Thanks." I sank into the chair across from him. Vernon and I had known each other for 40 years, ever since we coached youth baseball together when our boys were little. We had watched each other navigate careers, raise kids, and stand by each other through Margaret's funeral. Before retiring, he had been a structural engineer, the kind of man who tackled every problem with cold logic and infinite patience. If anyone could help me make sense of this, it was Vernon. "What's going on, Harold?" I took a deep breath and laid it all out. I told him about Cameron's frantic call from the cruise ship, about Vanessa somehow being in 2 places at once. I told him about the spotless kitchen, the sudden humming, and her eating Diane's shrimp salad without so much as a hive, despite a life-threatening allergy. I told him what Joseph at the bakery and Joyce at the market had noticed over the last 6 months. And finally, I told him about the empty jewelry box and the missing $65,000 worth of Margaret's legacy. Vernon listened without interrupting, his analytical mind processing every detail. When I finished, he sat in silence for a long moment. Then he leaned forward across the table. You think someone is impersonating her? I know it sounds crazy. It doesn't sound crazy at all, he said, taking a slow sip of his coffee. It sounds like you've been paying attention. The real question is, what are you going to do about it? I don't know. That's why I'm here. Has your son noticed anything off? Vernon asked. Michael is barely ever home. I ran a hand over my face. He got promoted to Chief Technology Officer 6 months ago, right around the time all of this started. He's in Arlington 3 or 4 days a week, dealing with database projects for clients in Northern Virginia. When he is home, he stumbles through the door at 9 or 10 at night, eats standing up, and falls asleep in front of his laptop. So whoever this woman is, this twin, she only shows up when Michael is out of town? Exactly. The pieces were beginning to fit together. She's careful. This is calculated. Vernon tapped his fingers on the table, deep in thought. You need hard evidence, Harold. Suspicions won't cut it. You need something concrete. Like what? Tail her, he said plainly, as if suggesting a trip to the hardware store. Next time she leaves the house, follow her. See where she goes, who she meets. If someone is helping her pull this off, and someone almost certainly is, she'll lead you straight to them. I considered it, trying to imagine myself sitting in my car, tracking her like some washed-up private investigator from a late-night movie. Trust your instincts, Vernon added gently. You knew something was wrong days ago. If Margaret were here, she'd tell you the exact same thing. He was right. Margaret always trusted her gut, and she had spent 40 years teaching me to do the same. All right, I said, I'll do it. Vernon reached across the table and gave my shoulder a firm squeeze. Call me if you need backup. The following afternoon, Friday, I put the plan into action. Michael had left for work hours ago to deal with another urgent database crisis for a client. Noah wouldn't be out of school until 3. Around 1 o'clock, I heard the jingle of car keys in the hallway. I stood behind my study door, keeping it cracked open just enough to see out. She called up the stairs. Harold, I'm running a few errands. Back in a couple of hours. Then the front door shut. I grabbed my keys and jacket, moving as quickly and quietly as my knees would allow. By the time I reached my car, a 10-year-old Honda Accord that blended into traffic far better than Michael's flashy Audi, she was already pulling away from the curb. I kept my distance. She drove east through downtown Annapolis, past the State House with its white dome gleaming in the afternoon sun, and past the gates of the Naval Academy, where midshipmen in crisp uniforms marched in formation. Traffic was steady, making it easy to stay 3 cars behind, just like in the movies. She crossed the Spa Creek Bridge, a short span connecting central Annapolis to the Eastport neighborhood. Having lived in this city my whole life, I knew every inch of the area. Eastport was older and more working class, its narrow streets lined with modest homes, some meticulously restored, others showing their age. 3 miles from our house, near Prince George Street, she turned onto Clay Street and slowed down. I dropped back, pulled over near the corner, cut the engine, and watched her park in front of a small house halfway down the block. Number 89. It was a single-story frame house painted a faded blue-gray. It might have looked charming decades ago, but now it just looked worn down. The front porch sagged slightly. The windows were draped with faded curtains, and a pot of dried, withered chrysanthemums sat by the door, clearly neglected for weeks. It was certainly not the kind of place you'd expect to find someone liquidating $65,000 worth of stolen jewelry. Vanessa got out of her car and cast a quick glance down both ends of the street. I slouched low in my seat. She walked up to the front porch, turned the knob without knocking, and stepped inside as if she owned the place. I sat in my car with the engine off, my heart hammering against my ribs. What was this place? I checked my watch and waited. 5 minutes passed. 10, 15. By the 20-minute mark, I couldn't sit still any longer. I stepped out of the car and began walking down the sidewalk, trying to look like an old man out for an afternoon stroll. When I reached number 89, I paused, pretended to adjust my shoelace, and glanced toward the front window. The curtain twitched slightly, and through the glass, I saw them. 2 women stood side by side in a small living room. They were identical. Same height, same frame, same dark hair pulled back into a ponytail, same posture. One wore jeans and a gray sweater, the clothes Vanessa had left the house in. The other wore an oversized cardigan over a simple house dress. They were talking, gesturing back and forth. I couldn't hear a word, but their facial expressions were vivid, familiar, and undeniably, impossibly identical. I froze on the sidewalk, my mind refusing to accept what my eyes were seeing. Twins, they were twins. My hands were still shaking when I got back home that evening. I went straight into my study, shut the door, and sat in the dark for 20 minutes, trying to process it all. Twins. Vanessa had a twin sister, and they had been swapping places. For how long? 6 months? Maybe longer. I turned on the desk lamp and unlocked the filing cabinet where Michael kept our family records. Bank statements, insurance policies, utility bills. When Vanessa moved in, he had left them with me for safekeeping because she had a habit of misplacing paperwork. I spread the last 6 months of bank statements across the desk. At first glance, everything looked standard. Mortgage payments, electric bills, car insurance. But then I began noticing a pattern. Cash withdrawals. Large ones. 1,500 here, 2,000 there. Always from Vanessa's individual account, the one she shared with Michael for household expenses. Over the past 6 months, nearly $4,000 a month had been pulled out in irregular chunks. I grabbed a notepad and tallied the numbers. $27,000 was completely unaccounted for. Then I found the letter. It was misplaced, tucked between 2 old credit card statements. The envelope was addressed to Michael at the Prince George Street address, but it had already been opened, likely by Vanessa before she shoved it into the pile. I pulled out the letter and read it twice, my heart racing with every word. Dear Mr. Mitchell, congratulations. Your application for a personal loan of $150,000 has been approved. Please review the attached repayment schedule and sign the enclosed documents. $150,000. Michael had never mentioned applying for a loan. Besides, with his recent promotion to CTO, he was making a substantial salary. He had no reason to borrow that kind of money, unless he hadn't borrowed it at all. I dug out Michael's old tax returns. He had signed them right at this kitchen table last April, and I had watched him do it. I laid the loan application next to his tax returns to compare. The signatures didn't match. Michael's true signature had a distinct loop in the M and a sharp angle on the final stroke. The signature on the loan document was a clever imitation, but the M was rounder, the angle softer. Someone had practiced copying it, getting close but not quite hitting the mark. It was a forgery. I leaned back in my chair, the letter trembling in my fingers. She wasn't just stealing jewelry. She was dismantling his financial life from the inside out. 3 days later, on Monday afternoon, I drove back to Eastport. I had spent the entire weekend agonizing over what to do. Confront Vanessa directly, call the police, tell Michael. Every option felt incomplete. I needed more answers. I needed to understand what I was truly dealing with before my son's life was completely ruined. So I returned to 89 Clay Street. The house looked exactly the same. Faded blue-gray paint, sagging porch, the dead chrysanthemums still sitting by the door. I parked across the street, took a deep breath, walked up the steps, and knocked. Footsteps echoed inside. The door opened an inch, and a woman's face appeared. It was the face I had been looking at for the past 10 months. But somehow it was different, softer, more uncertain. She wore a faded gray cardigan with frayed cuffs, no makeup, and her hair was tied back in a simple ponytail. "Can I help you?" Her voice was quieter than Vanessa's, laced with hesitation. "My name is Harold Mitchell," I said softly. "I'm Michael's father. I know about you and Vanessa." The color drained from her face instantly. I don't know what you're talking about." "Please," I interrupted softly. "I'm not here to cause trouble. I just need to understand what's going on." She hesitated for a long moment, then stepped back and opened the door wider. "Come inside." The living room was small and cluttered, but impeccably clean. A worn-out sofa, a coffee table stacked with library books, and a bookshelf packed with medical textbooks filled the space. Everything looked second-hand, well-loved and heavily used. She sat on the edge of the sofa, wringing her hands in her lap. "How did you find me?" "I followed her," I said simply. "I looked through the window and saw the two of you. You're twins." She nodded, tears already welling in her eyes. "Yes." What's your name? Olivia Caldwell. And Vanessa is your sister? Your twin? Her voice trembled. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I didn't realize she was lying to you. To everyone. She told me she just needed a break. Some time to herself. She said her husband was working all the time and she felt trapped. When did you start taking her place? I asked. How often? Olivia wiped a tear with the back of her hand. Only when her husband was out of town. Vanessa would call me the night before, tell me Michael was leaving for 2 or 3 days, and ask me to stay at the house. Her voice dropped to a whisper. I'd arrive early in the morning, right after Michael left for the airport. I'd stay with you and Noah, cook meals, help with his homework. Then the night before Michael came back, Vanessa would text me and I'd leave. She always returned before he stepped through the door. So Michael never saw you? Never. Vanessa was extremely careful about that. She made sure our schedules never overlapped. Olivia looked down at her hands, guilt heavy on her face. I didn't think it was wrong. I thought I was just giving her a breather, giving her a little time for herself. She was seeing another man, I said quietly. Olivia's face fell. I didn't know that. How much was she paying you? Olivia kept her eyes fixed on her lap. $1,200 each time? Every time you took her place? Yes. From somewhere in the back of the house, a door opened. Another woman appeared, younger, late 20s, holding a cup of tea. When she saw me, she froze. Olivia, what's going on? Who is this? Laura, this is... Olivia's voice cracked. This is Harold Mitchell, Michael's father. Laura set her cup down carefully, her expression shifting from confusion to realization. You're the father-in-law. I am. Laura looked at Olivia, then back at me. She sat down next to Olivia and took her hand. My name is Laura Griffin, she said. I'm Olivia's roommate. Before you judge her too harshly, you should know she didn't do this out of greed. She did it because she was desperate. Laura, please. Olivia tried to stop her, but Laura shook her head. He has a right to know. Laura turned back to me. Olivia's adoptive parents are very sick. Her father spent decades working in a factory, and his health is failing fast from lung complications. Her mother suffers from a chronic condition that requires round-the-clock care. Their medical expenses come out to $5,800 a month. Olivia dropped out of school 10 years ago to take care of them. She works part-time doing bookkeeping, but it wasn't enough. She was drowning. I looked at Olivia. She was weeping now, silent tears streaming down her cheeks. I thought Vanessa just needed a break, she sobbed. A few hours away from household responsibilities. She offered to pay me well, and I was at my wit's end. My parents are all I have. I couldn't bear to watch them suffer. What about Michael? Laura asked me. Does he know? No. I shook my head. He's been traveling constantly for work. Vanessa made sure Olivia was only there when he was away. Laura's expression hardened. So she planned the whole thing. Every bit of it. Yes, I said, she did. Did Vanessa mention anything about a loan? I asked softly. She took out a $150,000 loan in my son's name. Olivia's head snapped up. A loan? No, I had no idea. She never mentioned anything like that. She looked genuinely stunned. Either she was a world-class actress, or she truly had no idea how deep her sister's scheme went. Where was Vanessa going when you were at my house? I asked. Olivia wiped her eyes. To see a man. She didn't tell me much about him, but I know his name. What is it? She looked at me, her eyes filled with pain. Preston Whitmore. 3 days after meeting Olivia, I drove back to Clay Street. I couldn't move forward without understanding how two sisters, identical in every physical way, had ended up living such entirely different lives. This time a different woman answered the door. An older woman with silver hair pulled into a neat bun, her kind eyes bearing the quiet weight of decades of hard work. She wore a faded floral dress and held a dish towel in her hands. My name is Harold Mitchell, I said gently. I spoke with Olivia a few days ago. Are you Ruth? Her face softened. Oh, Olivia mentioned you might come back. Please come in. The house smelled of chamomile tea and aged wood. Ruth led me into the small living room, which looked even more modest in the daylight. A worn sofa, bookshelves sagging under the weight of medical texts, and framed photos everywhere, most of them showing a dark-haired girl growing up through the years, Olivia. Ruth gestured for me to sit. You want to know about the twins? I do. She took a slow breath, her gaze drifting toward a photo of two infant girls wrapped in matching pink blankets, held by a young couple who couldn't have been older than 22. 33 years ago, their parents were killed in an accident on Route 50 by a reckless driver. The girls were only 2 years old. Their mother was a waitress. Their father did odd jobs. They didn't have money, but they loved those little girls. What happened when Child Services stepped in? I was working as a nurse at Anne Arundel Medical Center back then. My husband, Howard, and I wanted to adopt both girls, but we couldn't afford it. We were barely making ends meet ourselves. Her hands twisted the dish towel. Then a family named Caldwell came along. Thomas and Patricia. He owned an accounting firm. She was a teacher. Middle class. Well established. They wanted to adopt one of the girls. They chose Vanessa. Yes. Child Services decided it was for the best. One girl would have a comfortable life with the Caldwells, and the other, Olivia, would stay with us. They said it was better than sending both girls into the foster system. Ruth's eyes glistened with tears. From the moment I laid eyes on that little girl, I loved her like my own. We finalized the adoption when she was 5. In every way that matters, she is our daughter. As for Vanessa, the Caldwells treated her well. Music lessons, private schools, college. But they moved to Delaware when Vanessa was 10, and we lost touch. Ruth shook her head. 6 months ago, the girls found each other. Vanessa reached out through social media. They met for coffee, and Vanessa cried seeing her sister for the first time in 30 years. Olivia told me she dropped out of college, I said. Ruth nodded, a deep sadness settling over her features. She was 19, studying bookkeeping at community college on a scholarship. But then Howard fell ill, a severe lung condition from 30 years of factory work. Shortly after, my own health began to decline. Medical bills piled up overnight. Olivia came home one weekend and simply never went back. She told us we needed care far more than she needed a degree. Her voice faltered. She's been taking care of us ever since. From the back of the house came the sound of a heavy, raspy cough. Ruth stood up. That's Howard. Excuse me for a moment. I followed her into a small bedroom where Howard Bradshaw lay in a medical bed, a quiet oxygen machine humming beside him. He looked fragile, his skin pale as parchment. Howard turned his eyes toward me. Who's that? This is Harold Mitchell, Ruth said softly. A friend of Olivia's. Olivia is the best thing that ever happened to us, he wheezed, pausing as another painful cough racked his chest. Don't let anything happen to her. I won't, I said, and I meant every word. Ruth walked me back to the living room. The doctor gives him about 6 months. That's why, when Vanessa offered to pay Olivia to stand in for her, Olivia took it. She was desperate. We were out of options. She met my gaze with quiet resolve. But Olivia didn't know what Vanessa was really up to. I know, I said. When this is over, I'll help you both. Ruth nodded, tears welling in her eyes. That afternoon, I met Vernon back at the City Dock Cafe. He took one look at my face and pushed a mug of coffee toward me. You need a private investigator, I said. Vernon pulled out his phone and made a quick call. 20 minutes later, a broad-shouldered man in his late fortnight, with silvering hair and sharp, watchful eyes, walked up to our table. Rick Morrison, Vernon said, retired Baltimore PD detective and the best investigator I know. Morrison sat down. Vernon tells me you need someone looked into. I slid a napkin across the table with a name written on it, Preston Whitmore. I need to know everything about this man. Morrison glanced at the name. Is this connected to something illegal? Yes. Give me a week. 7 days later, Morrison called. I met him in his office above a hardware store in Eastport. He opened a thick folder and pulled out a driver's license photo. A handsome, charismatic man in his late 40s, with dark, graying hair at his temples. Preston Whitmore doesn't exist, Morrison said. Real name, Derek Allen Hayes, 51 years old, originally from Richmond, Virginia. Professional scam artist, specializing in romance fraud. My stomach sank. He's been active for at least 8 years, Morrison continued. His target demographic is married women. He convinces them to siphon money from their family accounts, then disappears with the cash. He tapped a document listed with names. 8 confirmed victims across Virginia, Delaware, and Pennsylvania. Total losses, $2.1 million. $2.1 million. He operates under multiple aliases: Preston Whitmore, Brandon Cole, Marcus Stevenson. Morrison pulled out photos showing Hayes with different women, always wearing that same disarming, confident smile. He's currently seeing at least 3 other women simultaneously. Your daughter-in-law is just one target among many. I stared at the photos, anger burning in my chest. He's wanted in Virginia for grand larceny and identity theft, Morrison added. Delaware issued a warrant last year. But he's slippery. He moves fast, uses cash, and changes his look. He closed the folder. If your daughter-in-law is involved with this guy, she is in deep trouble. He will leave her with nothing. I picked up the folder, my hands shaking. Thank you. Morrison walked me to the door. Be careful. Hayes is dangerous. Not physically violent, but he destroys lives without a second thought. I looked down at the folder, staring at the face of the man who had been manipulating my daughter-in-law and draining my son's life savings. Vanessa hadn't just betrayed Michael. She was being used by a predator. On the eve of the confrontation, I sat in my study with the door locked, the desk lamp casting long shadows against the walls. Before me lay the leather notebook Margaret had given me for our 30th anniversary. Inside were 10 days of meticulous notes, observations, suspicions, and devastating truth. I flipped through the pages slowly, one by one, ensuring I hadn't missed a single detail. Cameron's call, the shrimp salad, the stolen heirloom jewelry, the twin sister standing in that modest house on Clay Street, Ruth's story about 2 infants separated 33 years ago, the forged loan documents, and Preston Whitmore, no, Derek Allen Hayes, the mastermind pulling the strings. Tomorrow night, everything would come to light, and I had to be fully prepared. I picked up my phone and began making calls. Cameron answered on the second ring. Dad, everything okay? I need you home tomorrow night. Can you fly back from Miami? Tomorrow? I heard him shifting around, likely checking a schedule. Yeah, I can swap shifts with Anderson. What's going on? Family dinner, 6:30. It's urgent. A long pause. This is about Vanessa, isn't it? About what I saw on the ship? Yes. See you tomorrow night. Next, I called Vernon. He answered immediately, as if sitting by the phone. Is it time? He asked. Tomorrow night, 6:30. Can you be here? Wouldn't miss it. Can you bring Detective Morrison? Will do. Ask him to bring everything he gathered on Derek Hayes. Consider it done, Harold. You're doing the right thing. I prayed he was right. The hardest call was to Olivia. She answered on the 4th ring, her voice tentative. Mr. Mitchell? Olivia, I need you at my house tomorrow night at 6:30. I don't understand why. Because Vanessa needs to face what she's done. And you need to be here. Like it or not, you're part of this story. My voice softened. I'm upset with you, Olivia. But the truth needs to come out. And it needs to happen in front of everyone. Silence stretched over the line. Will Michael be there? He will. He's going to hate me. He'll understand the whole picture, I promise. I paused. Olivia, you were manipulated, just like the rest of us. Tomorrow night, we put an end to it. Okay, she whispered softly. I'll be there. Finally, I called Michael. He was still at his desk. Of course he was. I could hear the rapid clatter of a keyboard and the quiet hum of an office in the background. Hey, Dad, what's up? I need you home tomorrow night for a family dinner at 6:30. Dad, I've got a massive presentation to prepare for Monday. Michael, I said, using the stern tone I hadn't used since he was 16. This is critical. More important than any presentation. You need to be home. No excuses. He quieted for a beat. Is something wrong? Is it Noah? Noah is fine. Everyone is physically fine, but we need to talk. All of us together. All right, he said, sounding unnerved. 6:30. I'll be there. Thank you, son. Hanging up, I leaned back and rubbed my eyes. One final arrangement remained. I walked next door and knocked on Diane Morrison's door. She opened it with a warm smile, which faded the moment she saw my face. Harold, what's wrong? Diane, I need a big favor. Anything. Can Noah stay over at your place tomorrow night? Maybe even sleep over? She studied my expression closely. What's happening? Something is coming to a head that a 7-year-old boy shouldn't or see or hear. Please, Diane. I need to know he's safe and well away from that house. She reached out and squeezed my hand. Of course. Bring him over at 6. We'll make popcorn and watch that superhero movie he keeps talking about. Thank you. Back in my study, I laid everything out on the desk like a prosecutor preparing a trial. The notebook detailing daily entries, 6 months of bank statements showing cash withdrawals, the letter regarding the forged loan, the empty jewelry box kept as stark evidence, and Detective Morrison's thick folder filled with photos and records of Derek Hayes' criminal history. I picked up the photo of Preston Whitmore, Derek Hayes. He was smiling confidently at the camera, his arm draped around a woman who wasn't Vanessa, likely another one of his victims. Looking at his face, my hands trembled with rage. This man had infiltrated my family, convinced my daughter-in-law to betray her husband, steal from her son, and commit outright fraud, all for money he intended to pocket from the very beginning. Tomorrow, he wouldn't be in the room, but Vanessa would be, and she would have to face the total ruin she had created. I pulled open the bottom drawer of the desk and retrieved an old photo album. I found the picture I was looking for, Margaret and me on our wedding day, young, hopeful, convinced we could handle whatever life threw at us. On the back, written in her neat handwriting, was a phrase I hadn't thought about in years. Always protect this family, Harold, at all costs. Love, M. I ran my thumb over the faded ink. I'm trying, Margaret, I whispered to the quiet room. God knows I'm trying. I thought about tomorrow, about the look on Michael's face when he learned the truth, about Noah growing up knowing his mother had abandoned them, about Olivia, so desperate she helped orchestrate this mess, and about Vanessa, who traded a good marriage for the hollow promises of a con man. I also thought about Cameron, Vernon, and Detective Morrison all coming to stand by me, because that's what family and real friends do. They show up when the floor falls out. I closed the album, stood up, and gathered the evidence into a single folder. Tomorrow at 6:30, I would lay it all out on the dining room table. No more secrets, no more lies. Just the cold, painful truth. I picked up a framed photo on my desk, our family portrait from last Christmas. Michael, Vanessa, Noah, Cameron, and me. We looked so happy. We looked like a real family. Tomorrow we would find out if we still were. I set the photo down softly and turned off the lamp. Tomorrow, accountability was coming. Evening settled over Annapolis, the air cool and sharp. I spent the afternoon arranging the dining room like a courtroom, chairs aligned around the table, documents stacked neatly at my spot at the head. Everything had to be precise. Everything had to be ready. At 6 o'clock, I walked Noah next door to Diane Morrison's. He was thrilled about the sleepover, chatting endlessly about the superhero movie they were going to watch. He didn't notice the tension in my shoulders or the slight tremor in my hands when I hugged him goodbye. Be a good boy for Mrs. Morrison, I said. I will, Grandpa. He ran inside, already asking Diane if they could make popcorn. Diane met my eyes over his head. He'll be fine. Go do what you have to do. I nodded and walked back to 247 Prince George Street. By 6:15, my heart was hammering so hard I could hear the pulse in my ears. Michael arrived first. His Audi pulled into the driveway at exactly 6:17. He walked through the front door still dressed in his work clothes. Slacks, a button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up, and his Chesapeake Digital Systems ID badge still clipped to his belt. Dad? He glanced around the living room, noticing the formal setup in the dining room visible from the entryway. What's going on? Where's Noah? Noah's over at Diane's for the night. His expression shifted from confusion to concern. Why, Dad? You're making me nervous. What is all this? Before I could answer, a car door shut outside. Cameron, my youngest, stepped through the door carrying an overnight bag. He was still in his cruise ship uniform, white shirt with captain's epaulets and dark trousers, his face tanned from months at sea. He dropped his bag and crossed the room in 3 quick strides, pulling me into a firm hug. I'm here, Dad. Michael looked between Cameron and me. Cameron, what are you doing here? I thought you were in the Caribbean. Swapped shifts with Anderson. Cameron released me and turned to his brother. Dad called, said it was urgent. Urgent? Michael's voice rose. What the hell is going on? Sit down, son, I said softly. Everyone will be here shortly, and then I'll explain everything. Right on cue, Vernon Nash's truck pulled up outside. He walked in without knocking, just as he had for 40 years, giving me a somber nod. He took a seat in the corner of the living room, hands folded in his lap, his analytical mind already taking in the scene. Michael looked at Vernon, then back at me. Dad. The doorbell rang. I opened it to find Detective Rick Morrison standing on the porch, a thick accordion folder tucked under his arm. He wore a sports coat over jeans, his retired badge still clipped discreetly to his belt. Mr. Mitchell. He shook my hand. Thanks for having me. He stepped inside, sweeping the room with a practiced eye, then sat near the entryway, resting the folder on his lap. Michael stared at Morrison, pale. Is that a detective, Dad? Did something happen? Is someone in trouble? Michael, please just wait. At 6:25, the bell rang one last time. I opened the door to find Olivia Caldwell standing on my porch. She wore a simple gray cardigan over a plain dress, her hair pulled back in a ponytail, no makeup. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her hands wringing nervously. Mr. Mitchell, she whispered, I almost turned back. I'm glad you didn't. Please come in. She stepped inside hesitantly, looking as if she were walking into a trap. Michael was in the kitchen pouring himself a glass of water. The glass slipped from his fingers, shattering on the floor. Vanessa? He stared at Olivia, absolute bewilderment written across his face. She looked identical to his wife. Same height, same build, same face. But she was dressed differently, moved differently, and there was a vulnerability in her expression that wasn't Vanessa. Olivia began, but Michael wasn't listening. He turned toward the living room, and that's when he saw her. Vanessa, his actual wife, stood near the fireplace in dark jeans and a burgundy sweater. She had been there the whole time, watching from the shadows as I answered the door. Now she stepped forward into the light, pale, her hands clenched at her sides. Michael looked at Olivia, then at Vanessa, then back at Olivia, then back to Vanessa. What? His voice cracked. What is this? Cameron stepped up beside his brother, placing a steadying hand on Michael's shoulder. Mike, take a deep breath. There are two of them. Michael's voice climbed, panic breaking through. Two Vanessas? Dad, what's happening? Am I going crazy? You're not crazy, I said gently. Please sit down. Michael looked ready to bolt, but Cameron guided him into a chair at the dining table. Cameron sat next to him, and Vernon moved over from the corner to sit on Michael's other side. Detective Morrison stayed near the door, folder on his lap. Olivia sat at the far end of the table, isolating herself as much as possible. Vanessa remained near the fireplace, arms crossed tightly over her chest. Vanessa, I said, sit down. She didn't move for a long moment. Then slowly, she walked to the table and took a seat opposite Michael, refusing to meet his eyes. The mantel clock ticked over to 6:28. Everyone was here, except Noah, safely at Diane's, and Preston Whitmore, Derek Hayes, who had no idea his scheme was unspooling. I looked around the room. Michael was staring in disbelief at the two identical women. Cameron had his jaw set, ready to support his brother. Vernon sat calm and steady. Detective Morrison was sharp and ready. Olivia looked small and terrified, and Vanessa's face had drained from pale to ash. This was my family, fractured, betrayed, but still my family. I stood at the head of the table, hands resting on the stack of evidence I had assembled. Notebook, bank statements, loan documents, empty jewelry box, and the dossier on Derek Hayes. Michael looked up at me, his eyes pleading, Dad, please, just tell me what's going on. I took a deep breath and met his gaze. Thank you all for coming. Tonight, we're going to lay out the truth. The clock struck 6:30. The room fell dead silent, save for the ticking of the clock and Michael's heavy breathing. 10 days ago, I began, Cameron called me from Miami. He told me he saw Vanessa board his cruise ship, but at that exact same time, Vanessa was right here. I started paying closer attention. I noticed changes. The immaculate cleaning, her eating shrimp without an allergic reaction, neighbors saying she seemed like a different person. Then I checked Margaret's jewelry box. $65,000 worth of family heirlooms. Gone. So I followed her. I pointed to Olivia, who sat with her head bowed, hands tightly clasped. This is Olivia Caldwell, Vanessa's twin sister. A suffocating silence fell over the room. Then Michael bolted from his chair. What? Dad, that's impossible. Vanessa doesn't have a sister. Sit down, Michael. No, this is insane. You're telling me my wife has a twin sister I never knew about? And they've been swapping places? Cameron stood up and placed a hand on Michael's shoulder. Mike, look at them. Look closely. Michael turned, his eyes darting back and forth between Vanessa and Olivia. I watched as the reality crashed over him, taking in the identical features, the exact same height, the same build. The only difference was their clothing and their posture. Vanessa stiff and defensive, Olivia small and terrified. No, Michael whispered, this can't be real. It is real, I said. Cameron, show him. Cameron pulled out his phone, displaying the photos. A woman in a white sundress on the ship deck, and her passport being scanned at the gate. Majestic of the Seas 10 days ago. Terminal C, Suite 124. Mike, I checked her in myself. I saw the passport with Vanessa's name on it. Later, I saw her on level 7 with a man. Michael took the phone with trembling hands. But she was here. She made breakfast for Noah. He looked at me. You saw her that morning. I saw someone who looked like Vanessa, I said. But it wasn't her. It was Olivia. Michael turned slowly to Olivia. Is this true? Tears spilled down Olivia's cheeks. I'm so sorry, Michael. I never meant to hurt anyone. I didn't even know you existed until 6 months ago. Answer me. You pretended to be my wife? Yes. The word slipped out like a sob. Vanessa reached out 6 months ago. We were separated at birth. I didn't even know I had a twin until she found me on social media. She told me about her life and asked for help. She said she needed time away, that she felt overwhelmed. She offered to pay me $1,200 every time I stayed at your house and played her part. Michael turned pale. $1,200? My adoptive parents are very sick. Their medical bills are $5,800 a month. I do part-time bookkeeping, but it wasn't enough. I was drowning. Olivia covered her face with her hands. When Vanessa offered to pay me, I took it. I thought I was just giving her a short break. I didn't know she was lying to everyone. I didn't know about your marriage or about Noah. How could you not know? You were in my house. You saw my son. Panic laced Michael's voice. How many times did you pretend to be his mother? Maybe 20, 30 times, Olivia wept openly. Only when you were away for work. Vanessa would call the night before, tell me you were leaving for a few days, and I'd come over right after you left for the airport. I'd stay until the night before you returned, then leave so Vanessa could step back in. Michael turned to Vanessa. Is that true? You brought a stranger into our house while I was away supporting this family? Vanessa set her jaw and said nothing. Answer me! Michael slammed his hand on the table. Did you do this? Vanessa raised her head, her gaze cold. Yes. The word hit like a stone. Michael stumbled back, Cameron catching his arm. Why? Michael's voice cracked. Why would you do this? I love you. We have a son. Why? Because I was suffocating! Vanessa's composure shattered. Do you have any idea what it was like being trapped in this house with your father while you built your career? You were never home, Michael. Never. Always in Arlington or Baltimore, working 12-hour days. I was entirely alone. So you paid someone to replace you? Michael's voice dropped to a deadly whisper. You abandoned our son so you could... He stopped, his face shifting. The man Cameron saw you with on that ship. Who is he? Vanessa looked away. Who is he? The room held its breath. I stepped forward. His name is Preston Whitmore. At least that's what he told Vanessa. I looked at my son, seeing the utter devastation in his eyes. Michael, sit down. There's more. More? Michael let out a hollow, broken laugh. What else could there possibly be? I met his gaze directly. The swap was just the beginning. I reached under the table, pulled out the empty jewelry box, and set it down hard in front of Vanessa. Vanessa, where is my late wife's jewelry? She stared at the box, silent. I opened it, revealing the bare velvet interior. Margaret's engagement ring, a 1.5-carat diamond in platinum, worth $15,000. Gone. I looked up at her. The Akoya pearl necklace I gave her for our 25th anniversary, $25,000. Gone. My voice remained steady, though my hands shook. My grandfather's solid gold, 1968 Omega Seamaster, $12,000. Gone. And Margaret's diamond and sapphire dress watch, $13,000. Gone. Michael calculated the figures in his head. That's $65,000. Yes. I closed the lid. All sold, all gone. Vanessa. Michael turned to his wife, his voice barely a breath. You stole my mother's heirlooms? Vanessa's face turned ash gray, but she remained silent. Next, I pulled out the bank statements, spreading them across the table. These are from your joint account. Over the past 18 months, there have been massive cash withdrawals. 1,500 here, 2,000 there. Always when Michael was traveling, I pointed to the highlighted total. $95,000 taken out in chunks to avoid raising alarms. Cameron leaned in, staring at the numbers. She stole nearly 100 grand? That's still not everything. I brought out the letter from the bank, the one hidden in Michael's file folder. 3 months ago, a personal loan application for $150,000 was approved in Michael's name. Michael snatched the letter, scanning it rapidly. His face flushed red. This is impossible. I never applied for a loan. I don't need a loan. I know you didn't. I placed his old tax return beside the document. Look at the signature. Michael compared the two, realization dawning on him. That's not my signature. The M is wrong. The angle is off. He looked at Vanessa, raw fury surfacing in his eyes. You forged my signature. Vanessa's hands began to tremble as she gripped the edge of the table. Let me make sure I understand this, Michael said, his tone dangerously quiet. You stole my mother's jewelry. You drained our savings. And you took out a $150,000 loan in my name without my knowledge. He stood up slowly. $310,000. Vanessa, how could you do this? Vanessa's voice quavered. I needed what? Michael's restraint broke completely. Needed to rob your own family? To steal your son's future? What on earth did you need $300,000 for? Detective Morrison stood up, retrieving the thick folder from his lap. I can answer that. All eyes turned to him. Morrison opened the file, pulled out the driver's license photo, and slid it across the table to Vanessa. The man you've been seeing, Preston Whitmore. Do you recognize him? Vanessa stared at the photo, her composure fracturing. Yes, that's Preston. His real name is Derek Allen Hayes, Morrison announced. 51 years old, from Richmond, Virginia. He's a professional scam artist who specializes in romance fraud. He targets married women, builds a relationship, convinces them to siphon assets, and then disappears with everything. A heavy, suffocating silence gripped the room. Over the past 8 years, he has defrauded at least 8 women that we know of, with total losses exceeding $2.1 million. Morrison pulled out a document listing the cases. He's currently wanted in Virginia for grand larceny and identity theft. Delaware issued a warrant last year, and Pennsylvania is building a case. He operates under multiple aliases: Preston Whitmore, Brandon Cole, Marcus Stevenson, and he is exceptionally good at what he does. Vanessa shook her head frantically. No, you're wrong. Preston isn't... He wouldn't... Vernon Nash stood up, pulling out his phone. He had remained quiet, but now he swiped through a series of images and held the screen in front of Vanessa. These were taken last month by the investigator we hired. The photos showed Preston, Derek, with 3 different women, holding hands with a blonde woman at a restaurant, kissing a redhead outside a hotel, and walking with another woman. He's seeing multiple women simultaneously, Vernon said calmly. You're not his only target, Vanessa. You aren't even his only current target. He's running this exact same scheme on at least 3 other women right now. Vanessa stared at the images, her reality collapsing. The money you stole, Morrison pressed gently. Where is it now? Vanessa's voice was barely audible. I gave it to Preston. He said he was investing it for us, for our future together. He said once we had enough, we could leave and start over somewhere new. The Cayman Islands. Her voice cracked. He promised. Morrison's tone was compassionate but unyielding. The money is gone, Vanessa. He's moved it offshore or spent it. You will never see it again. Once he drains everything he can from a target, he vanishes. That's his pattern. That's what he did to the 8 women before you. Michael collapsed back into his chair, burying his face in his hands. Cameron placed a steadying arm over his brother's shoulders. In the corner, Olivia wept quietly. Vanessa suddenly bolted upright, her chair screeching against the floor. You don't understand, she cried out, her voice trembling. Preston loves me. He told me. He promised. She looked around the room, desperately searching for anyone who might believe her. You're all wrong. He loves me. He wasn't using me. We had plans, real plans. Vanessa, I said gently, he's a criminal. Everything he told you was a lie. No, she shook her head violently. You don't know him. You don't know what we had. The level of denial in her voice was devastating. She leaned hard against the table, her knuckles white. Under the light of the chandelier, her face was completely drained of color, her breathing ragged. She raised her head, looking at the faces surrounding her. Michael, Cameron, Vernon, Detective Morrison, Olivia. Then she opened her mouth. You all think you know everything. I stood at the head of the table, hands resting on the leather notebook and the stack of evidence, remaining entirely silent to let the moment weigh on her. Michael leaned forward in his chair, his hands clenched into tight fists. Cameron stood near the doorway, arms crossed. Vernon leaned back, watching intently. Detective Morrison rested a hand on his file folder. Olivia kept her face buried in her hands. Vanessa straightened up, her expression turning from panic to sharp defiance. Fine, she shouted, her voice cutting through the room. You want the truth? Here it is. She glared directly at me, then turned her eyes onto Michael. Yes, I took the money. Yes, Preston and I were leaving the country. We had everything planned, a fresh start in the Cayman Islands. Michael's face went completely pale. Cameron's jaw dropped. Vernon remained still, his eyes narrowing. Vanessa kept going, her words pouring out in a bitter rush. Preston found us a villa right on the water. 3 bedrooms, private beach. He showed me the pictures. White sand, clear water, palm trees. He said we'd buy a boat and sail around the Caribbean. No more pretending, no more hiding, and no more living in a house that smells like someone else's late mother. The words felt like a physical blow. Margaret's perfume still sat on the vanity upstairs. Her apron still hung on the hook in the kitchen. Michael stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. Shut up, he said, his voice shaking with anger. Just shut up. But Vanessa wouldn't stop. She turned on him, her eyes fierce. Do you have any idea what it felt like? She yelled. Being the poor adopted girl who married into a comfortable middle-class IT family. I grew up in a 2-bedroom apartment with 4 other foster kids. I wore hand-me-downs and ate meals from the food pantry. Then I married you. A man who worked 60 hours a week in Arlington and Baltimore, came home exhausted, barely looked at his own son, and thought making pancakes on a Saturday morning made him Father of the Year. Michael flinched as the words hit home. Preston promised me the life I actually deserved. Vanessa pressed on, her voice raw. He told me I was beautiful. He said I was worth more than a drafty old Victorian house in Annapolis with a heavy mortgage. He said we were going to really live. Cameron stepped forward, blocking the doorway. Where is the money, Vanessa? She turned to him. For a second I thought she might break down, but instead she let out a short, bitter laugh. With Preston, she said, safe and sound, where none of you will ever touch it. Cameron's face flushed, and he took another step toward her. Vernon reacted quickly, placing a hand firmly on Cameron's shoulder. Easy, son, Vernon said quietly. Michael remained standing, staring at Vanessa as if looking at a stranger. $300,000, he said quietly. You stole $300,000 from my family, from my father, and from your own son's future. Vanessa's calculated persona began to crack. She looked down at the dining table, her posture faltering. I didn't mean... You sold my mother's engagement ring. Michael's voice cut through the air, sharp and loud. The ring my father gave her 47 years ago. You forged my signature to take out a loan. You drained our life savings. You lied to me, to Noah, to everyone. I felt backed into a corner, Vanessa snapped back, her eyes flashing with defiance. Do you think I wanted any of this? Do you think I enjoyed sneaking around, paying my own sister to cover for me, and taking family jewelry? I felt completely trapped, Michael. Trapped in a marriage that felt like a prison sentence. She spun around toward Olivia, who sat huddled in her chair, weeping softly. And you, Vanessa spat through gritted teeth. You were supposed to stay quiet. You were supposed to take the money and keep your mouth shut. But no, you had to run your mouth and hand over everything. You ruined it." Olivia raised her head, tears streaming down her face. "I'm sorry, Vanessa," she whispered. "I never intended to hurt anyone. I thought I was helping you. I thought you just needed a few hours to clear your head. I had no idea you were taking things. I didn't know anything about Preston or the money or—" "Of course you didn't," Vanessa cut her off harshly. "Because you're naive, assuming everyone is as soft as you are." I took a slow step forward, my voice low and unyielding. "That's enough." Vanessa turned her anger on me. "Enough? You think this is enough, Harold? You dragged me in here, humiliated me in front of everyone, exposed every misstep I've made, and now you expect me to sit here and take it? You made your choices," I said evenly. "Now you have to live with the consequences." A heavy silence settled over the room. The mantel clock ticked away the seconds. Outside, a passing car swept its headlights across the curtains of our Prince George Street. Home. Vanessa grabbed her purse off the back of her chair. "Fine," she said, her voice brittle. "I'm done." She turned and headed for the front door. This time, Cameron didn't move to stop her. Michael remained seated, motionless, his face drained of color. Vanessa paused at the doorway, resting one hand against the frame. She looked back over her shoulder, her voice dropping to a whisper. "You'll regret this. Every single one of you." Then she was gone. The front door shut with a solid thud, followed by the sound of her heels descending the porch steps, the car door closing, and the engine of the silver Toyota Camry, the one we bought her 3 years ago, turning over. Headlights swept across the living room walls as she pulled away, her taillights fading down the street toward Route 50, heading west toward Baltimore. Silence returned to the house. Michael stood in the center of the room, staring at the empty doorway. His shoulders slumped, and after a couple of halting steps, his knees gave out, sending him collapsing into the nearest chair with his face buried in his hands. I walked over and placed a hand on his shoulder. "It's over, son," I said softly. "It's finally over." The phone rang at 11 p.m. 2 nights later. Ever since Saturday's confrontation, I had been moving through the days in a daze. The house felt unnaturally quiet. Michael and Noah were upstairs, Cameron had returned to his ship, and Vanessa was gone. I picked up the receiver. Unknown caller. "Hello." A long silence followed, then a raspy, shaking voice came through the line. "Harold, I need help." It was Vanessa. I sat up and switched on the lamp. "Where are you?" "Baltimore. A motel off Route 40. Her voice cracked. I didn't know who else to call. I held the phone tight against my ear. "What happened?" Traffic hummed in the background on her end. After a long pause, the words came tumbling out in a desperate rush. "I reached out to Preston after I left. He told me to meet him at the Marriott in the Inner Harbor. He said everything was ready. The villa, the bank accounts, the new passports. He walked me through transferring the money into a joint offshore account. Nearly $300,000, Harold. Every single cent I had left." My grip on the phone tightened. "I woke up this morning and he was gone," she continued, her voice breaking completely. The room was cleared out. His bags, his phone, everything vanished. I checked the account and it was wiped clean. 0. I tried calling his number, but it's disconnected. He took every last dime. I could hear her crying, a quiet, hopeless weeping. "He used me, just like I used Michael," she whispered. "And now I have nothing. No money, no Preston, no plan. I'm sitting in a $20 a night motel room with $40 in my purse and nowhere to go." I walked over to the window, looking out at the dark, empty street. "Come back, Vanessa." "I can't. Michael hates me, all of you." "We're going to contact the authorities," I interrupted gently. "Preston, Derek Hayes, has outstanding warrants. If you cooperate and help them track him down, it could make a difference in your legal outcome. But you need to face this and make it right." A long pause hung over the line. "Okay," she whispered. "Good. Call me when you get close." I hung up the phone. Across the hall, Michael was standing in his doorway, arms crossed. "Is she coming back?" "In a couple of days," I said. "We're going to reach out to the authorities." By Thursday afternoon, Vanessa pulled into the driveway. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, clothes rumpled, her hair tied back in a messy ponytail. I met her at the door and gestured toward the living room. The investigator is here. Special Agent Sarah Brooks was seated on the sofa. In her mid-30s, with short brown hair, sharp eyes, and a dark blazer, she stood up and extended her hand. Ms. Caldwell, I'm Agent Brooks, with the Financial Crimes Division. Thank you for meeting with us. Vanessa sat down quietly. I took an armchair nearby. Michael had taken Noah over to Diane's for the afternoon. Agent Brooks opened her folder. I'm going to be straightforward with you. You're looking at serious state and federal charges. Fraud, grand larceny, forgery. That carries potential prison time and significant financial restitution. However, if you cooperate fully, provide testimony and records, and assist us in locating Derek Hayes, we can present that to the prosecutor. It could mean a substantial reduction in penalties, probation, or possibly house arrest. But we need complete transparency. Vanessa reached into her purse and pulled out a manila envelope. Wire transfer receipts, hotel records, text screenshots, the account details he gave me, it's all in here. Brooks took the envelope, reviewed the contents, and nodded. This is a solid start. She laid 3 photographs on the table, surveillance stills of Preston alongside different women. Derek Allen Hayes, 50 years old, 8 confirmed victims, over $2 million in documented losses, active warrants in Virginia, Delaware, and Pennsylvania. A textbook romance scam artist. He identifies targets through community events, builds trust, promises a future, drains their accounts, and vanishes. He's done this repeatedly. Vanessa stared at the photos, her face pale. 8 times? Likely more, Brooks said. He changes names, appearances, and backstories, but the strategy is always the same. Brooks retrieved another photo, timestamped 2 days prior at BWI Airport. It showed Preston walking through security with a carry-on, wearing sunglasses. We've been tracking his movements. He made a mistake by using a card tied to a previous alias to purchase a ticket. Vanessa leaned forward. Where is he going? Brooks looked at her steadily. He booked a flight out of BWI for tomorrow morning at 6:30 a.m. Destination Grand Cayman. Silence settled over the room. Vanessa stared at the image, her hands shaking, eyes brimming with tears. That was supposed to be our flight, she whispered. He told me he cared about me. Brooks closed her folder and stood up. He was lying, just like he lied to every woman before you. She tucked the folder under her arm. The difference this time, Ms. Caldwell, is that law enforcement will be waiting for him. 4 days after the meeting, Michael and I sat in Agent Sarah Brooks's office at the Field Division in Baltimore. Agent Brooks opened a folder and pulled out a printout. Vanessa's information was invaluable, she explained. The wire records, hotel receipts, and communication logs gave us his full pattern, his current aliases, and his financial movements. She slid a printout across the desk, a flight confirmation under the name Preston J. Whitmore. Derek Allen Hayes booked a one-way ticket out of BWI, Brooks said. Tomorrow morning at 6:30 a.m. to Grand Cayman. Federal agents will move in before he reaches the gate. She looked at both of us. I'm inviting you to observe the arrest if you wish. You don't have to be there, but I thought you might want closure. Michael looked at me and I nodded. We'll be there. The alarm went off at 4:30 a.m. the next morning. I had barely slept, my mind racing through everything that had transpired. Margaret's empty jewelry box, the forged loan, and Vanessa's admission that the money was gone. Michael picked me up at 5 a.m. We drove in silence down Route 2 to I-97, heading toward BWE. The highway was quiet under the fading night sky. By 5:30 a.m., we met Agent Brooks in Terminal A near the departure level. She wore a dark windbreaker marked with federal credentials. 4 plainclothes officers were stationed discreetly nearby. He's scheduled to check in at Counter 12, Agent Brooks said softly. American Airlines, 6:15 a.m. departure window. We'll secure him right before security. She pointed toward a seating area near the main concourse. Wait there, keep your distance, and let us handle it. Michael and I sat down. The airport was slowly filling with morning travelers. I looked at my watch, 6 a.m. Michael leaned forward, his hands clasped between his knees. I keep thinking about Noah, he whispered. How do I explain all of this to him? One step at a time, I replied. We resolve this first, then we take care of home. At 6:12 a.m., my phone vibrated with a message from Brooks. Target entering. 2 minutes. I looked up. Agent Brooks stood near counter 12, casually checking her phone while the other officers moved into position near baggage drop and the escalators. Then I saw him. Preston Whitmore walked through the automatic doors at 6:15 a.m., dressed in a tailored gray suit, carrying a designer leather bag over his shoulder. Wearing sunglasses, he moved with complete confidence. He walked straight toward counter 12, set his bag on the scale, and handed over his identification. Michael stiffened beside me. "That's him," he murmured. Agent Brooks stepped forward. "Excuse me, sir." Preston turned with a polite smile, but as he noticed the credentials, his expression froze for a fraction of a second before he forced a smooth demeanor. "Can I help you?" Brooks displayed her badge. "Derek Allen Hayes, federal agents. You're under arrest." Preston's smile evaporated. He took a quick step back. "I think you have the wrong person. Wire fraud, money laundering, and identity theft," Brooks stated plainly. "Don't move." Preston bolted, dropping his bag and sprinting toward an exit. But 2 officers cut off his path immediately, taking him to the floor near a support column. Within seconds, his hands were secured behind his back with handcuffs. "You have no right!" Preston shouted, his voice echoing across the terminal. "I haven't done anything." Agent Brooks walked over, holding up a file containing bank records, wire transfers, and sworn statements. "Derek Allen Hayes," she read out, "also known as Preston Whitmore, Ryan Caldwell, and Marcus Bennett. Multiple active warrants across Virginia, Delaware, and Pennsylvania." Preston stopped shouting, breathing heavily as he stared at her. Officers searched his carry-on bag, recovering several banded stacks of $100 bills, a laptop, and a fraudulent passport bearing his photo under a different name. Agent Brooks turned to an officer. "Count on the cash?" "$80,000, the officer replied. Brooks checked her phone, reviewed a confirmation, and nodded. The transfer was frozen in time. Another $140,000 remained secured in the domestic holding account. She looked down at Preston. "That's $220,000 recovered, roughly 70% of the funds siphoned from Vanessa Caldwell. The rest was moved offshore, but this portion is impounded." Preston remained silent, staring at the floor as officers escorted him toward the exit. Travelers watched as the man in the rumpled gray suit was led away in handcuffs. Brooks walked over to us. "It's complete," she said quietly. "Arraignment is set for this afternoon on federal charges." Michael watched as the officers led Preston through the doors. "It really is over, Dad," he said softly. I placed my hand on his shoulder. "Yes, son, it is." Yet I knew the road ahead remained long. Vanessa's legal proceedings, supporting Olivia's family, and helping Noah process everything. The arrest provided closure, but the recovery was just beginning. 2 weeks after Preston's arrest, Michael and I sat in the Anne Arundel County Circuit Court on Church Circle. The courtroom was traditional, with dark wood paneling, high ceilings, and rows of wooden benches. Vanessa sat at the defense table with a court-appointed attorney, her shoulders slumped. Preston, Derek Hayes, sat 20 feet away in an orange jumpsuit and restraints, guarded by federal marshals. The judge entered the room, reviewed the case file, and called the court to order. United States versus Derek Allen Hayes, also known as Preston Whitmore. The judge looked over her glasses at the defendant. "Mr. Hayes, you have been convicted on multiple federal counts of wire fraud, money laundering, and identity theft involving over $2 million in losses across multiple jurisdictions. You demonstrated a calculated pattern of fraud, targeting vulnerable individuals." She paused, adjusting her papers. "This court sentences you to 18 years in federal prison, followed by 5 years of supervised release, with full financial restitution ordered to the victims." Preston showed no visible reaction as marshals escorted him out. The judge turned to the next file. State of Maryland versus Vanessa Marie Caldwell. Vanessa stood up, leaning slightly on her attorney. "Ms. Caldwell, you have entered a plea of guilty to grand larceny, forgery, and conspiracy to commit fraud involving over $300,000. However, the court acknowledges your full cooperation with federal authorities, which proved essential in securing the conviction of Derek Hayes." The judge closed the file. You are sentenced to 2 years of probation, 500 hours of community service, and ordered to pay $90,000 in civil restitution to the Mitchell estate. A protective order prohibits contact with Noah Mitchell during your probation period. Any violation will result in immediate revocation and incarceration. Vanessa lowered her face into her hands. The judge then addressed Michael. Mr. Mitchell, the final decree regarding your marriage is granted, with full legal and physical custody of your son, Noah, awarded to you. Michael nodded silently. 15 minutes later, we stepped out of the courthouse. A week after the sentencing, a restitution disbursement of $220,000 was processed from the funds recovered during Preston's arrest. That evening, I sat at my desk looking at the documentation. Margaret's original jewelry could never be replaced, and the remaining funds moved overseas were lost. But my thoughts kept turning to Olivia, a young woman who had made desperate choices while overwhelmed by her adoptive parents' medical bills. I remembered Margaret's perspective on family. It wasn't defined solely by blood, but by commitment and supporting one another through hardship. I pulled out my checkbook and drafted a cashier's check for $50,000. The next morning, I drove over to Eastport. Number 89 Clay Street looked unchanged, faded blue siding, worn curtains, and the quiet neighborhood setting. I walked up the porch steps and knocked on the door. Ruth Anderson opened it, looking surprised. "Mr. Mitchell, may I come in?" She stepped aside. The small living room was immaculate despite the worn furniture, and I could hear the steady hum of the oxygen concentrator from the back room. Olivia appeared in the hallway, halting when she saw me. I drew the check from my jacket pocket and handed it to Ruth. "This is for you and Howard. $50,000. It will cover your medical debt and allow Howard to transition into a proper care facility with full-time nursing support." Ruth stared at the paper, her hands trembling. "Mr. Mitchell, we can't accept this." "You can," I said firmly. "Olivia made poor choices, but her actions stemmed from deep concern for your well-being. You took her in when she needed a home, and you deserve support now." Ruth began to cry quietly, and Olivia stepped forward, embracing her. "Thank you," Olivia whispered. "Thank you so much." "Use it well," I said, placing the check on the table. A month later, Howard Bradshaw moved into a care facility on Annapolis roads, with dedicated medical staff and a garden courtyard. Ruth visited daily, while Olivia worked part-time at a local market and spent her evenings with them. 4 months later, Howard passed away peacefully in his sleep. The memorial service was small, held at a local chapel on West Street, with about 20 people attending. Ruth sat in the front row with Olivia and her roommate, Laura, while Michael, Noah, and I sat near the back. After the service, I walked over to Olivia and placed a supportive hand on her shoulder. "Your father would be proud of you." Olivia looked up, her eyes bright with tears. "He wasn't my biological father," she said softly, "but he loved me like one. He and Ruth saved my life." "And you took care of them in return," I replied. "That's what real family does." Outside, Ruth stood near the steps, and Olivia walked over, putting an arm around her shoulders as they supported each other. Michael stepped up beside me. "You did a good thing, Dad. Your mother would have done the exact same thing," I said quietly. We walked back to our car. Noah climbed into the back seat and asked if we could stop for ice cream, and Michael agreed with a smile. I started the engine and pulled onto West Street. The legal process was finished, sentences were served, and the financial matters were settled as best as possible. What remained was the quiet work of healing, moving forward, and helping Noah understand the changes in his life. The hardest part was finding the right way to explain everything to a 7-year-old, someone too young to grasp complex fraud or betrayal, but old enough to feel the painful absence of his mother. 3 weeks after the court date, Michael and I sat down with him in the living room. Michael sat on the sofa with Noah while I took the armchair opposite them. Afternoon light filtered through the windows. "Noah," I said gently, "you know that sometimes grown-ups make very wrong choices, right?" He nodded slowly, looking up with serious eyes. "Your mom made some very serious mistakes," I continued softly. "She did things that broke our family's trust, and because of those choices, she won't be living with us anymore." Noah's face fell, his lip quivering. "Did I do something bad, Grandpa?" he whispered. Michael pulled him close, kissing the top of his head. "No, buddy," Michael said, his voice thick with emotion. You didn't do anything wrong. Not a single thing. Dad and Grandpa love you more than anything. These were choices your mom made, and they have nothing to do with you. Where is she? Noah asked as tears welled in his eyes. Why isn't she coming home? I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees. She has to focus on fixing the mistakes she made, I explained calmly. And that's going to take a very long time. Noah cried quietly for a few minutes, leaning his head against Michael's chest while Michael held him tight. After a moment, I cleared my throat softly. Noah, do you remember the nice lady who visited a few times? The one who looks a lot like your mom? Noah looked up, wiping his nose with his sleeve. The lady who made cookies? He asked. That's right. Her name is Olivia. She's your mother's twin sister, your aunt. She didn't know about the wrong choices your mom was making. She just wanted to help, and if it's okay with you, she'd like to visit us sometimes. Noah looked thoughtful and a little hesitant. Will Aunt Olivia stay around? He asked quietly. Before I could answer, footsteps sounded in the hallway. Olivia appeared at the living room doorway, holding a plate covered in foil. She had been waiting in the kitchen to give us time to talk first. Hi, Noah, she said gently. I brought some fresh chocolate chip cookies, right out of the oven. She walked over quietly, set the plate on the coffee table, and uncovered it. The warm scent filled the room. Noah looked at the cookies, then at Michael, and then back at her. Olivia knelt down to eye level with him. I know I look just like your mom, she said softly, and I know that might feel confusing, but I'm your Aunt Olivia, and I'd really love to be your friend if you'll let me. Noah stared at her in quiet curiosity. Olivia smiled warmly. How about we have a cookie and some milk, she suggested, and you can tell me all about what you're learning in school. She sat cross-legged on the rug and took a cookie from the plate. Noah watched her for a long moment before slowly sliding down from Michael's lap and sitting across from her. He reached out, picked up a cookie, and took a small bite. I'm in 2nd grade now, he murmured softly. Olivia's smile widened. 2nd grade? That's big stuff. What's your teacher's name? Mrs. Patterson. Is she nice? Noah nodded, and just like that the conversation began. That first week was rough. Every time Noah saw Olivia, he would freeze, his eyes wide with fear. A few times he ran crying to his room, and Michael or I would have to go sit with him, gently reminding him that Olivia wasn't Vanessa, that she was safe, and that she wasn't going anywhere. Olivia had endless patience. She never pushed him, giving him space whenever he needed it. She came by twice a week, Tuesday afternoons and Saturday mornings. Each time she brought something with her, cookies, a new coloring book, or a picture book from the library. By the 2nd week, Noah stopped running away. By the 3rd week, he started calling her Aunt Liv. One Saturday morning, Olivia took him to Quiet Waters Park. They fed the ducks, played on the swings, and walked along the nature trails. When they came back, Noah was laughing, a real, genuine belly laugh we hadn't heard in months. Aunt Liv makes funny voices when she reads, he announced over dinner that night. She made the monster sound just like a pirate. Michael looked across the table at me, relief written all over his face. 2 months after our first conversation, Noah's teacher stopped me at afternoon pickup. Mr. Mitchell, she said with a warm smile, I wanted to show you something Noah made today. She handed me a piece of construction paper, a crayon drawing of 4 stick figures standing in front of a house under a bright yellow sun. Above each figure, Noah had carefully written a label. Grandpa Harold, Dad, me, Aunt Liv. I stared at that drawing, my throat tightening. He talked about his Aunt Olivia the whole time in art class, Mrs. Patterson told me. He says she makes the best chocolate chip cookies in the world. I folded the drawing carefully and tucked it into my jacket pocket. Thank you, I managed to say. That evening I showed it to Michael. He stared at it for a long moment, then used a magnet to pin it to the refrigerator, right next to Noah's school photo and Cameron's drawing of his cruise ship. Margaret would have been so proud. 3 weeks later, on a Tuesday evening, Olivia was reading to Noah in his bedroom. I was downstairs washing dishes when I heard their voices floating down the hallway. Olivia putting on silly accents and Noah giggling uncontrollably. Then things went quiet. I dried my hands, walked upstairs, and stood at the open doorway. Noah was sitting up in bed in his dinosaur pajamas, where the wild things are spread across his lap, and Olivia sitting beside him. He looked up at her, dead serious. "Aunt Liv?" he whispered softly. "What is it, sweetie? Are you going to read me a bedtime story every time you come over?" Tears welled in Olivia's eyes. She blinked them back and smiled. "Every single time," she whispered. Noah threw his arms around her neck and gave her a tight hug. Olivia closed her eyes and held him right back. I backed away quietly, leaving them to their moment. Downstairs in the kitchen, Michael was putting on a kettle for tea. "He's going to be okay," I said. Michael looked up, a soft smile touching his face. "Yeah," he whispered. "I think he is." The two of us, father and son, stood there in the quiet kitchen, listening to the soft murmur of Olivia's voice upstairs, reading about wild things, faraway places, and a boy who sailed back home, to the place where he was loved most of all. For the first time in months, the house felt like a home again. 6 months after the sentencing, life began to settle into a new rhythm. It would never be the same as before. Margaret had been gone for 12 years. Vanessa was serving probation in California with a strict no-contact order regarding Noah, and Howard had passed away peacefully. But the atmosphere in the house had completely shifted. Somehow it felt lighter, as if we had been carrying a crushing weight for so long that we had forgotten what it felt like to set it down. Michael's healing was slow, but it was steady. Every Wednesday at 4 o'clock, he drove over to an office building on West Street for counseling. He had started going 2 weeks after the trial. At first, he resisted, insisting he didn't need to talk to a stranger about his problems. But I pushed him to go, and he stuck with it. About 3 months in, after Noah was fast asleep, we sat together on the back porch. Michael had a beer in hand, staring out at the darkening sky. "Dad," he said quietly, "I don't know if I'll ever get married again. The thought of trusting someone like that again, letting someone into my life, into Noah's life, it terrifies me." He took a sip. "But I'm working through it in therapy. I'm learning that what happened wasn't my fault, and that trust can be rebuilt, even if it takes years." I placed a steady hand on his shoulder. "Margaret used to say that healing isn't about forgetting, it's about learning how to carry the weight differently." Michael nodded, offering a small smile. "Yeah, that sounds just like Mom." In May, Michael earned a major promotion at Chesapeake Digital Systems. He came home that evening carrying a bottle of champagne and wearing a genuine smile I hadn't seen in over a year. Noah ran to the door to greet him, and Michael scooped him up and spun him around. "Guess what, buddy? Dad got promoted." I popped the champagne and we toasted, Noah raising a glass of apple juice. Michael told us all about his new role, leading the entire engineering division. Bigger projects, better compensation, and true financial stability. Finally, after months of legal fees and settling outstanding debts, things were turning around. "I'm proud of you, son," I said. Yet, far more than any title or promotion, what made me proudest was the time he poured into Noah. Saturday mornings became soccer practice at the elementary school field. Michael coached from the sidelines while Noah ran drills with a dozen other 7-year-olds. Afterward, they'd stop by the Main Street bakery for cinnamon rolls, coming home smelling of sweet icing and fresh grass. Tuesday nights were for homework. Michael sat patiently at the dining table, helping Noah with spelling lists and addition problems. He never raised his voice, just offered encouragement. "Let's try that one again, buddy." Sunday afternoons were spent fishing at Quiet Waters Park, always returning with tall tales about the one that got away, though one time Noah actually reeled in a little largemouth bass. Michael snapped a picture and texted it to Cameron, and Noah kept that photo on his nightstand for months. One Saturday morning, I watched through the kitchen window as Michael taught Noah how to throw a football in the backyard. Michael demonstrated the grip and the spiral. Noah's throws started out wobbly but slowly improved, and Michael cheered for every single attempt. I thought of Margaret, wishing with all my heart she could see them now. Olivia found her own footing too. She still lived with Ruth in that little blue-gray house in Eastport. After Howard passed, Ruth struggled with grief and loneliness, but Olivia was right there by her side. She landed a part-time accounting job doing remote bookkeeping for a few local businesses. It wasn't a fortune, but it paid the bills and allowed her to stay close to home with Ruth. Twice a week she came over to visit us. On Tuesday evening, she'd arrive around 5:30 with groceries and cooked dinner. She and Noah set the table together, Noah chatting endlessly about school, while Olivia listened to every single word as if it were the most important thing in the world. After dinner, she helped Noah with his reading assignments, while Michael and I took care of the dishes. On Saturday morning, she came over for coffee. She and I would sit on the front porch talking about Ruth's health, Noah's progress, and Michael's work. The conversation was easy and comfortable, and somehow, without anyone planning it, she and Michael became real friends, the kind of friends who could talk about serious things without any awkwardness. Michael would ask about Ruth, Olivia would ask about his projects, and they'd share laughs over Noah's latest obsessions. They'd sit on opposite ends of the sofa while Noah watched cartoons between them. There was warmth and trust, but no romance. Both implicitly understood that crossing that line would complicate the peace we had worked so hard to build. Olivia was Aunt Liv, Noah's safe harbor, Ruth's caregiver, and a cherished part of this household. That was more than enough. Michael put it best after Olivia left one evening. "She's a good person, Dad. I'm really glad she's in our lives." "Me too, son," I replied. "Me too." Cameron called every Sunday evening without fail. He was still out at sea, commanding the majestic of the seas through the Caribbean, but he never missed a check-in. At 6 o'clock, my phone would ring, and Noah would scramble to answer the video call. "Uncle Cameron," he'd shout. Cameron would wave from some tropical port, telling Noah stories about dolphins, sea storms, or passengers accidentally leaving parrots in their cabins. Noah would show off his latest drawings or Lego builds, and Cameron would react as if they were true masterpieces. "Your brother leads an adventurous life," Michael joked one night, "while we lead a quiet one." "Both are good," I smiled. "Different, but both good. As for me, I found peace in the quiet moments, tending to Margaret's garden every morning, caring for the purple irises, rose bushes, and tomato plants she had loved so much. One late afternoon, Noah asked if he could help. We knelt in the dirt together, planting new tomato seedlings. I told him stories about his grandmother Margaret, how much she loved gardening, and how she believed that planting things was a way of planting hope. "Do you miss her, Grandpa?" Noah asked softly. "Every single day," I said. "But I see her in you, in your dad, and right here in this garden." Noah nodded thoughtfully, patting down the dirt around a tiny green stem with his hands. I spent my evenings on the porch, reading or simply watching the quiet street, reflecting on everything we had navigated, the deception, the loss, the law enforcement involvement, the courtroom, and the grief. Yet somehow we were still standing, firmly united as a family. Late one summer evening, as the sun began to dip below the horizon, the air was warm, and the cicadas hummed in the trees. Michael and Noah were playing tag in the yard, Noah squealing with delight, while Michael pretended he couldn't quite catch him. The screen door opened behind me, and Olivia stepped out onto the porch, carrying a tray with 2 glasses of iced tea. She handed me one and sat down in the rocking chair next to mine. "Beautiful evening, isn't it, Harold?" she said softly. I took the glass and smiled. "It sure is, Olivia," I said. "It sure is." We sat in comfortable silence, sipping our tea, watching as Michael finally tagged Noah and scooped him up into the air. The boys' laughter rang out like a bell across the yard, and I thought to myself, this is what we fought so hard for. A full year has passed since that quiet November morning when Cameron called and said, "Dad, Vanessa is on my ship." On a peaceful afternoon, I sat in my study with the leather notebook open on my desk. Over the last 12 months, I had filled its pages with observations, questions, fears, and quiet victories. Now I turned to the final page and wrote in neat script, Day 365. We made it through. I set my pen down and looked around. Margaret's photograph rested on the corner of my desk, her smile captured in time. Outside, the backyard garden she loved was settling in for the cooler months. Somewhere in the house, I could hear Noah's distant laughter. 1 year. 365 days since that unbelievable phone call, since I stood between two identical women and realized my daughter-in-law was living a double life. So much had changed, yet here we were, grounded and whole. Noah is 8 now, thriving in second grade at Annapolis Elementary. His teacher tells us he's doing wonderfully, reading above grade level, making friends, and no longer asking why his mother isn't coming home. He still has tough moments occasionally, but they are fewer and farther between. He has his Aunt Liv, who shows up every Tuesday and Saturday like clockwork, baking cookies, telling stories, and making sure he never feels like a burden. Michael is on solid ground. Serving as Chief Technology Officer at Chesapeake Digital Systems, he manages a team of 20 engineers and earns enough to rebuild the stability that was taken from him. He attends his therapy sessions every Wednesday, takes Noah fishing every Sunday, and hasn't started dating, stating he isn't ready yet and might not be for a long time. But he is healing, learning to trust his judgment again, and realizing that someone else's choices do not define his worth. Olivia has built a life of independence. Working as a full-time bookkeeper for 3 local businesses, she earns enough to support herself and care for Ruth. She helped Ruth move into a manageable single-story apartment in Eastport, closer to healthcare facilities. Twice a week she comes to our house, not out of obligation, but because she wants to be here. Because without anyone forcing it, she has become true family. Vanessa remains in California serving her probation, working at a grocery store, living in a studio apartment, and restricted from contacting Noah. 3 months ago, a letter arrived, an apology addressed to Noah. Michael showed it to me and asked for my thoughts. I suggested keeping it tucked away for the future. Perhaps one day Noah will want to read it, but not now while he's still growing and healing. Cameron is still out at sea, commanding the majestic of the seas. He calls every Sunday, sending postcards from Jamaica, Cozumel, and Grand Cayman. On the wall of his cabin hangs a framed photo from last Christmas. Michael, Noah, myself, Olivia, and Ruth, a new kind of family portrait. As for me, I am 68 years old, 12 years widowed, still living in the house Margaret and I bought 40 years ago. I still tend her garden, and I still teach Noah what it means to be honest, kind, and steadfast when life gets hard. Over this past year, I've learned a great deal about truth and deception, family and betrayal, accountability and redemption. I used to think deception was simple, true or false, black or white. But this journey taught me that lies thrive in the shadows, growing quietly like weeds until they strangle everything genuine around them. The deceit we faced nearly tore us apart. Not just the financial loss, but the daily pretense, the manipulation, and using a sister as a pawn in an elaborate charade. Yet it was Olivia's honesty that helped save us. She stepped forward when she could have stayed silent, cooperating when running away would have been easier. In doing so, she gave us a foundation to rebuild upon. I also used to think family was strictly about bloodline, shared DNA, or legal documents. But this year showed me that real family consists of the people who show up and stay, the ones willing to do the hard work, who stand by you when things collapse and say, "I'm right here." Olivia shared no legal bond with us initially, yet she became family through hundreds of quiet, consistent moments. Tuesday dinners, Saturday morning coffee, bedtime stories, soccer games, and endless patience with an 8-year-old's questions. On the flip side, Vanessa had every legal and familial bond, yet she chose money over marriage, deception over honesty, and abandoned her family for empty promises. In doing so, she became a stranger. I used to view consequences and redemption as opposites. Vanessa received probation, Preston was sentenced to 18 years in federal prison, and justice took its course. But legal outcomes alone don't bring inner healing, nor do they erase past pain. Redemption isn't about erasing what happened. It's about building something better out of the aftermath. Olivia found her path by caring for Ruth, loving Noah, and showing up every week with patience and a commitment to do right. Michael found his by committing to therapy, being a present father, and choosing to open his heart to trust again despite his fear. And as for me, I found my purpose in protecting this home. I didn't handle everything perfectly, but I upheld the promise I made to Margaret. I kept our family grounded and safe. I look at Margaret's photo, tracing the edge of the frame with my thumb. Margaret, I whisper to the quiet room, if you're watching, I hope you're at peace. We protected our family. It's marked by experience, but we held the line. Outside, the purple irises she planted are resting for the winter, waiting for spring. They will bloom again, just as they always do. I see your spirit in Noah's laugh, I continue softly, in Michael's strength, and in the quiet warmth around our dinner table. You're still right here with us. I close the notebook and stand up slowly, my knees offering their familiar creak. I walk over to the window. Out in the yard, Noah and Olivia are kneeling near the garden bed along the fence, planting tulip bulbs for the coming spring. Noah pats down the soil with his small hands, while Olivia points out where the next bulb should go. He says something I can't quite hear, and she laughs, gently ruffling his hair. I watch them for a long moment, remembering everything we navigated, the uncertainty, the shock, the legal process, the quiet grief, and the slow, steady work of recovery. And a gentle smile comes over me. This is what family looks like. It isn't picture perfect. It carries history and scars, but it is real. It is built on honesty rather than pretense, on conscious choice rather than mere obligation, and on a steadfast commitment to love even when the road gets rough. Noah looks up, catches my eye through the window, and gives a big wave. Olivia turns and waves too, offering a warm, genuine smile. I wave right back at them, and I think to myself, this is enough. This is more than enough. Thank you for walking through this journey with me. It wasn't an easy road, but it was a true one. Facing a situation where someone close to you is living a double life tests every boundary of trust. Would you confront the issue head-on or take time to gather the facts? Would you focus on protecting your loved ones or trying to mend what was broken? Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you and made you reflect on truth, family, and what it takes to rebuild after a breach of trust, please consider liking and subscribing. The truth eventually finds its way to the light. Sometimes it takes longer than we'd like, and sometimes the journey demands more than we anticipated. But standing by what is right is always worth it in the end. Looking back, a betrayal within a family cuts deeper than any harm from a stranger. When someone living under your roof, sharing your table, and helping raise your children is hiding a double life, it shakes the very foundation of trust. If you ever find yourself facing a situation that feels wrong, don't wait. I spent days carefully gathering evidence while my gut was already sounding the alarm. Trust your instincts, address issues early, and protect those who rely on you, especially the children. The lessons were hard-earned. Deception steals more than material things. It disrupts your peace of mind and makes you question past memories. But I also learned that true family isn't defined merely by blood or a certificate. It's defined by who steps up and stays when the truth comes out. Olivia showed unwavering loyalty, while Vanessa chose a path of deceit. These experiences serve as a reminder. Pay attention to warning signs, act with wisdom, and protect your home. Life doesn't promise a path free of hardship, but it gives us the strength to face whatever comes our way with dignity and resolve. Thank you for staying through to the end. Share your thoughts in the comments. What would you have done in a situation like this? I'd genuinely like to hear your perspective. And if this story brought you value, consider subscribing so you don't miss future narratives. A gentle note, while inspired by real-world relational dynamics and human experiences, certain elements have been dramatized for storytelling purposes. The truth always finds the light. Sometimes it just takes the quiet, steadfast dedication of a family holding together to see it through.